Okay, so
Thank you very much.
So Chris and I have worked together. He's supplied me Red Wings for over a decade. We've worked together on the wholesale side with different projects that we've done. We still do. And he's become a very, very good friend of mine. So, Chris, here we go.
Okay.
I'll try not to screw you too much. Let's take it gently.
That would be nice. Yeah.
Right. So, not giving ages away. I think you and I are same sort of era.
Same sort, yeah.
Yeah, we are. And I know some fun stuff from my younger days. So I was doing wholesale distribution, so on. You were in the jeans business with Levi's.
Yep,
and so on.
correct.
So let's go through your life history a little bit on work, where you were, what you did, what you didn't do, what you wish you did.
Okay. Yeah. Start at the beginning. It's
Yeah.
always a good place.
Yeah.
I got into the fashion business by not by trial and error, but certainly it was a desire, because where I lived in Northampton, at Moulton Park in Northampton, at the bottom of the road where we lived, there was an industrial estate, and on there was this brand called Levi's, and I decided that it would be very nice to see if I could go and work for them in that very naive way. You know, you go and knock on the door, ask for a job, they give you it, and you stay there forever. But unfortunately, it wasn't like that. So when I finished school, I went to France for 6 weeks and worked for my cousin on a campsite. And when I got back, my father said to me that he gave me 2 weeks to get a job, and if I didn't get a job, he would enroll me at the local job agency, and they would find me a job. So he was quite keen that I got out to work. And I'd written to Levi's many times. They said nothing going. And so when they came back to me and said, we have 2 jobs that would be fantastic for you. One would be put in soap boxes on Moulton Park, or there's a filing clerk required at Levi's. So I jumped at the Levi's job, and I was there for about 3 months initially. So I started in the end of September, October, and every Monday I used to sign on, and every Friday I had to go back to the office where the sales director, classic days, you had all the workers out on the shop floor, and then you had on the office floor, and then you had the sales director in his big office at the top, and he had to sign off. So I'd knock on the door every day, every Friday, for him to sign up and ask for the job, and he said, job doesn't exist. And I did it for week after week after week. Knock on the door, no, go away. And he even got to the stage where I'd go to the door, look through the glass, and he'd just say, no, don't bother. And then Christmas came and went, and I got signed back up to go there again. And he signed me in on the Monday. And on the Friday, I went to knock on the door, and out of nowhere, he just beckoned you in. In you come. And he said, new year, new budget, yes, you can have it. And I stayed there for just over 10 years.
So how old were you then at this stage?
I was 18.
So you had a car at the age of 18?
I started off as a filing clerk. I then did sales planning. So I did all the inventory. The brand was growing particularly well. And then I became a field promotion salesman. And that's when I got my first company car. It was a 1.6L Cortina Estate.
Wow.
Registration number RHP 965W.
How many times did you get broken into?
Never.
Oh, really?
Never.
On a Cortina?
Not on a Cortina. And it was just full of posters. Full of posters and giveaways. And that's all it was. And I drove around the Midlands.
Could it be that they broke into the car and saw what was inside and they thought, no jeans?
Possibly. But I remember, I picked it up in the morning and I went home to show my dad at lunchtime. And where we lived, we had a very small drive, and I parked it on the grass verge,
right.
And it'd been raining. So as I pulled away, I got all the mud and grass spats all up against the side of the car. So I'd had it less than 2 hours, and it was filthy dirty, so that wasn't a particularly good start. So I stayed there for 10 years, and I ended up going from field promotions into running the territory for the southeast of England. Multi-lining. So we had menswear, womenswear, kidswear, Levi's casuals, Levi's for men. So I had 5 brands.
So you were doing all 5?
I was doing all 5.
Wow.
And then
You need a truck, don't you, really?
And then they hoiked it all back. And by the time I left in '86, we'd just sold in Laundrette, the launch of the 501 campaigns. So we did Nick Cayman, we did the whole thing there, and then I left that.
So tell us about those days. I know a little bit about that. So I know that kids were going shop to shop and saying the 5 for 1, and they had it under the counter. And so you must have loads of different stories about that. So share some.
When I was working inside the office block, they were selling virtually no 501s, virtually none. Certainly not in the unwashed state, the 0117. The only place that was doing it was there was a guy called Russell, can't remember his surname, but it was Match Place Jeans in Greenwich, and he advertised in the back of the NME. So in the back of the NME, there's a little thing, original Levi 501, 0117, the unwashed, salvaged the whole lot, and he was probably doing 200, maybe 250 a year, so not many. And then we went with the Nick Cayman campaign after they launched it they had this concept in the US, and we launched it and we said, you're going to have these. And they were saying, no, you can't give them away. And then it launched on Boxing Day, and it just went crazy, absolutely crazy. People were offering us money, offering us all kinds of stuff to get that stuff. It went for nothing, it went vertical. And then it's a classic case. You can't keep up. You don't have them, which fuels it even more and more. So it was madness. Yeah, for about 2 years.
And then talking about those retailers, because jeans retailers are slightly different to boutique retailers in those days, in particular. So you had walls of jeans and so on, and it was a different vibe and so on. But any fun stories, any fun characters, or any characters that you like? Don't mention names, obviously, but any that you thought, oh my God, I've got to go and see this person.
I had another customer who helped me. I had to lug all the collection up to the top floor of his office block, so maybe 3 floors up, without a lift. So you have to take your bags of stuff up there, and the rail. And he offered to help me take it all back down again at the end of the meeting, which was very kind. And I thought, yeah, great. Bit naive at this time. And he told me to bring the car around and he'd make sure the stuff was down there. So I went and got my car, put it out, and he opened the window 3 floors up and threw it all out the window. And as a 21-year-old, you think, oh,
what's that all about?
Is that normal? I don't think it is, but it was crazy.
And what about making appointments and seeing people, whatever? Because obviously we didn't have internet, we didn't have cell phones and so on. So some of the listeners, viewers, or whatever, we're thinking, we're all relics and so on. So how does that work out? How did it work in the transition and so on?
You had your company car and you had a business BT credit card. And you used to drive the motorways. You have to pull off into Newport Pagnell or Watford Gap or Chorley or wherever. And you had to queue to use telephones in the car parks. And you had to dial in your number and you had to wait for them. And it was gone are the days where you could just make calls on the way to work, and you had to put an hour out of your time just to phone customers.
Do you think, just generally, buyers were more professional, more easy then, or harder then, or compared to nowadays? How things evolve with buyers?
Buyers were slightly more, because I dealt with more of the independents as opposed to at that time, because I was just a junior. I wasn't doing national accounts at any time. At that time, it was still quite personal. You could have some kind of friendship with them, and they would pick up the phone. Because you thought they liked you, but in hindsight, you represented Levi's, or you represented the brand that they wanted. Yeah. And I was always told, the mark of a friendship is, do they still want to talk to you after you've left? So I think that at that time it was 1-to-1, but as you started doing national accounts, they became a little bit more frosty.
Did you manage to always get through, or did you have innovative ways of getting through?
There was a London-based buying team who would not reply to any phone calls.
What do you do? What does Mr. Dent do?
Well, I was told to be a little bit more creative. If they were stonewalling, creative. And so I thought, well, okay, what I'll do is I'll send her some flowers. And I sent some flowers to her with a little card. And, we spent some money. I ran it past the office first, and they said, yeah, that's fine. And I sent them the flowers, and I put a little card. Please, can you call me? I'd like to discuss the new collection. Can you call me before the flowers die? So, okay, so you got a week.
Yeah.
2 weeks later, we got a reply, and it just said the flowers are dead. And at that point, I realised this meeting was going to go nowhere. So that's the only one that really sticks in my mind. Was
Did you get involved with fax machines? Because it wasn't emails; it was fax machines.
It was fax
and letters.
Oh, we had this wonderful contraption that Levi's gave us, and it was like a typewriter with upturned cup sockets on it, one at each end, and they fitted the old handle of the telephone, the dial-up telephone.
Right.
So you would type your orders in, and it would hold them all on the system.
Yeah.
And then you dial up, and you could hear the dial up.
Oh, right. Yeah.
As you do. And then you put the cups in. You put the phone into the 2 cups, press send, and you had to sit there for like half an hour. And then as we progressed and the mobile phones came in, I remember very distinct, I was working at Fowler at the time. And I was driving with sales director, who was a friend at the time, in his car. And he got one of the first mobile phones I'd ever seen.
The brick.
And he phoned his mate in Australia.
And it went through?
And it went through.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, wow, this is super cool. And it was the size of a brick, yeah. It was so I went from having to stop and going from motorway service stations on the phone through to prehistoric fax machines and all this type of stuff, and then on to email and mobiles now. So it's become easier, certainly.
So what were you doing at Farmers? Was it on the road or?
Farmer, I was national account manager.
Okay.
So I was doing working with the likes of BHS, the Burton Group. We did a lot of own label work because we had a factory in Cumnock in Scotland, in Ayrshire. So we were doing short lead time denim for the Moto brand.
Yeah.
So we worked at that, and I was there 10 years. So I did 10 years at Levi's. I did 4 years at Easy Jeans, which is Hong Kong Chinese, based at the bottom of Edgware Road. And then
Staples Corner, I think it was. Was it Staples Corner?
Yeah. And then I did 10 and a bit years at Fowler. So I did 25 years in jeans all told.
And then jeans, or then we went into boots and red wings?
Fowler at the end, when I left, was going through some tough times, and I was made redundant.
Okay.
So then I used that to go into footwear. I thought I've done enough jeans.
So did you know red wing boots at the time?
Not at the time. I went to work for Caterpillar.
Okay.
My first job in footwear was Caterpillar. I was brand manager for British Industrial Giant,
right,
which was real heavy boots.
Yeah.
Worked with them for some time. Was brand manager for Chevignon.
Yeah.
So that's a crossover between denim and footwear again, and apparel and footwear. Worked for them. Then went to work for the FII group, who originally had the Frank Wright brand as well as their own Lotus label. And that's when I started working with some of the more mainstream fashion retailers with their basic black shoe with Frank Wright, which is where I got into, started to see the likes of the Wolverine boots, the Caterpillars, the DMs of this world at scale, and Red Wing. And I was introduced to those by Nikos in Camden High Street, who owned the boot store. So that's where we first got hold of Red Wing. And he recommended me for a job. And
when you say recommended you for a job, so you applied, or he put you together with them?
He told me that there was a guy who was looking after Europe, a guy called Paul Olsen, and he'd flown over, and he was looking at putting some agents in place for Europe.
Yep.
And Nika said, I hope you don't mind, but I've given him your details because you're the only guy that I know who can do it, who's up to the standard that they want, and blah, blah, blah. So we did that, and I had my first interview on the Wednesday with Paul. I had my second interview in the railway station cafe at London Bridge before it all got redeveloped. And he offered me the job on the Saturday morning before we flew back to the States. And then on Tuesday afternoon, I was sitting on the veranda at the Hotel du Palais, overlooking Biarritz Bay, for my first sales meeting.
Wow.
So it took 6 days to get it
So
sorted.
roughly how long ago was that?
That was 2002.
Okay, so we're talking 22 years ago.
22 years.
I remember going to trade fairs where I felt that I had to go and change because everyone, all the buyers for all the decent retailers up and down the country were in Red Wing. And I remember this was like, whoa.
Yeah, it's probably my fault. Because when we started, the first season I started, the season before I started, they sold 267 pairs in the UK.
Wow.
That was it.
Wow.
And 150 of those came from Nikos.
Wow.
On a sale or return deal.
Wow. So if we just stay on Red Wing for a minute or two, do you know what I'm wearing, by the way? It's a little test for you because this is from the archives.
That is a pair of Beckmans in a.
How old do you think?
Beckman first came out around 2000 well, first of all, it was a centennial boot. It was 2005.
Right.
They did it as the founder's boot, but then that had 1905 on the outside.
We are getting geeky, but go on.
So I would say that is possibly that's a Beckman. It's with that colorway, it's probably 9013 or 9014, probably a 9013 style.
Okay.
So I reckon.
How old do you think that one is?
I would say that color's 10 years.
Wow.
9-10 years, something like that.
I can't verify, but I think I'm pretty. I would go with that.
Yeah,
it's about
certainly a Beckman, and they're bringing it back for winter 24. So
which we've got all three colours on.
Yeah,
so we'll have them in stock. So apart from that, what's your favourite pair ever?
Favorite pair ever?
Your personal favourite, not what you done the most money on, perhaps, or whatever. What's your personal from the heart?
My favourite pair is the first pair I bought, which is a pair of 875s, which was at the time it was the original tan.
Yeah.
Because that's when you join the company, you have to have part of the uniform. So I bought that. That's the first pair, and they're now 22, 23 years old, and resold many times. But the one thing that I did do to them when I went around a factory tour during a sales meeting in the States, I had the top two eyelets taken out and I had speed hooks put in.
Right.
So mine have been a little bit updated. Hybrids, personalized. But probably the most important boot, so therefore my favorite because it opened up a lot of doors for me, was the work chucker.
Right.
3141, 3140. It was a 3-eye lace chucker. It's still in the range now. That introduced the brand to a lot of people because at the time when we first started, the 6-inch mock was probably a little bit too aggressive, too high in the toe box for them. Didn't really understand it. So the work chucker was an easy one. They understood that exactly. It had the same leathers, it had the white sole, but it was a more understandable last.
Right.
So they bought into that, and then they migrated up into the top boot, onto the 6-inch mock. So that was very important. So therefore, I like that a lot. But the one I've got on today is the 8804, which is the black super sole.
So if we stay on favourites, if you go back to Levi days, perhaps, what was your favourite jean be, or either through business that made you the most sales, or a personal?
The most memorable pair that I had, because when I joined them when I was 17.
Yeah.
There was the 5220217. Remember the name? It was a 24-inch flare, I think it was.
Flare.
Do
you have those?
No. Bear in mind that when I was at school, with 16, 17, when did I leave school? 75. So it was the time of the really wide pant.
Yeah.
It was the 2-inch platform for blokes. Yeah. So to have that A-line type product was easy. So you go for that, and then you replicate that in your work. So that was where the 522 came out from. But then silhouettes changed, and you went down to a 527, which was an 18-inch straight leg, or maybe 16-inch. But then you look down, you can see your foot.
Yeah.
I haven't seen my foot in a pair of trousers for years. So that was a memorable pair. But my favourite pair, obviously, is 501.
And if we go back
the original 501.
If we go back to the ad with Nick Kamen, the laundrette
Yeah.
ad. If you take that when the ad came out, I know there would have been a huge demand the 5-for-1s, because obviously kids were going to the shops and whatever. How did your work change? Were you getting loads of people saying, listen, I need more, I'll give you extra money on the side and so on? Because obviously we all been through this spell where you got something that everyone wants and you get offers of bribe and almost blackmail sometimes. Did you go through that phase? Did you have people knocking on your front door?
We had people giving us incentives to make sure they had the product. But the problem was, if you haven't got the product, it doesn't matter what people. But equally, that wasn't part and parcel of the game. The part and parcel of the game was, we didn't have product. You have to wait, and people had to wait, and that was it.
But did you have people?
And as a 20-year-old, 21-year-old facing that kind of pressure, it's just something that you got on with, and you just ignored, and you did your job. Because when you're 21, 22, driving around in a company car, working for the best jeans brand in the world at the time, you don't want to lose that job. You don't. You just just closed down. So, but yes, it happened.
Yeah.
Yes.
But what I'm really digging at is, how did it change for you from having to knock on people's doors?
Oh, I see. Right. Yeah.
To almost the other spectrum, where people knocking on your door saying, "Come on, I've been your buddy for the last 3 years, and you need to look after me."
Yeah, we were given an allocation.
Right.
So we had a number that we could work to, and people would want more than their fair share of the allocation.
Yeah.
And that's always been the case for everyone for whatever company you work with.
And if you remember, I don't know if they exist anymore, any prolific retailers that you perhaps dealt with in those days that you think were getting it absolutely nail on the head, but didn't quite make it to these days?
I didn't look after London at the time. The regional agent, Merrick Segaloff, had the territory.
Right.
So he was dealing with the people like Club Row and Rinkies and people like that. But they could certainly do some big numbers. But there were just people that I heard about. I was at the bottom rung at the time. So you just look up to these guys and see what their business was, and to a degree, you look to see if you could learn anything from those. But Merrick was a wily old fox. He was.
Is he still in the game, or is
no? He passed some time ago.
Okay.
And his son Mark became took over his role, and in fact Mark became a sales manager. But Merrick was clever. He was clever. Right. I remember somebody came to him one day and said to him that he had all these cords that he couldn't sell, so could he return them? About 200-300 pairs of cords. Well, I said, yeah, of course you can.
There's quite a lot of quantity for a reseller.
Yeah, absolutely. So Merrick went to him and said, fine, yeah, we can take those back. He said, incidentally, did you know that denim outsells cords 4-1? And the guy said, no. He said, so if you want to return these 300 pairs of cords, you don't want 1,200 pairs of denim. So the guy said, I'll keep my cords. And Merrick said, yeah, I think that's a good idea.
So if we go a little bit deeper, because my age, I forget things, and even you probably told me the same stories in the last couple of months. If we go back, because I remember my first job, every time I have a job, what I did the first week, what I wore to work, what my apprehensions were, and so on. So we go a little bit sort of deeper. So let's say you had your first job at Levi's.
Yeah.
Doing that filing job that you mentioned. Did you think you had to change your attire to what you would have been doing the week before as a student? Did you have to quickly go to the shops and buy some Levi's? What did you do?
I had to change what I was wearing, because if you go into a corporate office, beforehand my attire was khaki tank pants, Converse high top, white t-shirt, and an army jacket. So that didn't really fit into corporate world.
Right.
So yes, you had to buy Levi's, and perversely, it was a collar and tie.
So the first day of Levi's, you were wearing collar and tie.
Yeah, because I didn't know what I was walking into.
Yeah.
And my father explained to me it's better to overdress.
Yeah.
And show some respect.
Did you
go underdress and show no respect?
Did you go to the barbers or hairdressers the day before, 2 days before?
No, I probably had a shower. Wanted to impress.
Has that changed? You have showers now?
I've had showers now, yeah.
and then jobs after that, if you remember, is any special efforts you made?
As you go through life, obviously you start to dress appropriately. I think it is the right way.
But when you were at Levi's, for example, I presume you had perks of getting Levi products cheap.
Oh yeah,
and so on.
Staff
so were you head to toe where you could be with Levi's even on your days off?
Yeah, because you worked for one of the best jean companies, so I'd always have a pair of jeans on, or I had a sweatshirt, basic crew neck sweatshirt, 9609946, I think was the basic.
And did it mean that all your friends had to wear Levi's as well?
Oh yes, yes. It's amazing how popular you become when you can get cheap Levi's. So I think we could buy up to 5 pairs a month.
Okay. So I'll give you a tricky one. Let's say the trend on Levi's was flares. Let's say it was flares at a particular time.
Yep.
And you didn't want to wear flares.
Yep.
Were you rebellious enough to go, I'm not going with the trend? Did you go with the trend?
I've always dressed what felt comfortable for me.
Right.
Because I've never chased it. Never chased the fashion, because if you try and chase it and you didn't feel comfortable, it was never going to work.
Yeah.
Never going to work.
Well, those are very wise words. But were you that wise at that young age?
Personal style is always important.
But were you that wise at that young age?
No, I didn't want to get laughed at.
Okay.
So I didn't want to get pointed at. Yeah. So you tend to go for the easy route.
Right. So
that's where it was.
You must have had loads of girls flocking over you with the company car, dressed up in Levi's. So come on, let's get into a bit of the private.
Have to stop this right now.
So after Levi's,
yes.
The next job, Farmers, was it?
No, it was. I went self-employed for a bit. I went to work for myself, and I did a little bit with Lois and C17.
So when you go self-employed, did you feel liberated that you didn't have to conform to the red tapes of a big organization like Levi's? Could you could wake up when you want, you go to bed when you want, you make your own decisions.
Yep.
You make your bed, you lay in it.
But also, when you leave Levi's, or a big company like that that's very successful, and I found this subsequently as well, but you kind of realize that there's a big security, big arm around you, that people answer the phone or talk to you because you work for Levi's, not because you work for another brand and you're a wonderful chap. It's because you work for the people that you work for, and sometimes being me wasn't good enough, wasn't big enough as a draw. So then it became very, very difficult, and that helped me later on when I went self-employed, when I went set up my own business, when I started becoming a footwear agent with Red Wing, because you needed that umbrella around you. So I did self-employed work for about a season, and it was just never going to happen. So I went to work for Easy Jeans,
right?
As a territory salesman. And
again, that was a much different organization to Levi's, obviously.
Yes, it was Hong Kong Chinese.
So how did you find the transition?
It was difficult because it wasn't as well known.
Yeah.
It was fairly young company in the UK.
Yeah.
Successful in other parts of the world, but it was difficult here. But I stayed there 4 years, and we got the territory up and running, and we did a good job there, and it grew and grew and grew. And then it got to the stage where from a personal development, I wanted to move on because I wanted to do national accounts.
So when you were Easy Jeans, did you wear the shirt and tie any longer? Or?
Oh no, the shirt and tie thing had gone. It was denim and very casual, because very quickly you realize that you have to dress appropriate to the guys that you're going to see.
Yeah.
You have to make them feel comfortable as well as to be comfortable. You didn't want to turn up, a young or anybody really in a denim environment with a shirt and tie trying to.
So when you did that with Levi's, did you occasionally not wear the shirt and tie when you went on to the retailers?
I was told at Levi's to have a change of clothes in the car.
All right.
You wear what you wore, Jen, but if you were going to see somebody who wore a shirt and tie, then you had a shirt and tie in the car and trousers in the car.
Wow.
And that came from my sales manager, who was ex-FMCG, ex-Gillette Mars, that you always had a change of clothes in the car so that if you had to change your presence, your appearance, then you could do that. So and he taught me many things that I still did 50 years later.
And then after Easy Jeans, what was next?
Easy Jeans, I went to Falmer.
And did you do that thing? How old you are, how experienced you are, you ever thought you're having a feeling of what the environment's going to be? Did you adapt on the first day, the first week, what you wore? Did you go in a bit more clean and neat than you normally would?
I was a little bit more aware of what I was wearing because I had gone from a territory salesman to a national account manager.
Right.
So I was going into the Burton Group, I was going into Debenhams, I was going to BHS, we were going into these bigger players, and we were doing all the mail order houses at the time. So it was, people like Grattan's, Empire Stores, Littlewoods, all the predecessors to Next and Very and all these type of people.
And did your job role change in that? You had to perhaps use your expense sheet a bit more, i.e. wine and dine, or when you were doing national accounts?
We had to run things past people before we took them out. Absolutely. We were encouraged where possible to, do entertaining, but equally when you're starting out with the mail order houses particularly and the national accounts, the Burton Group were very keen not to be seen any favoritism, and the mail order houses were, what are you going to do for me to make me put your stuff in the catalogue?
Yeah.
So that was very difficult. And at that point, whilst you heard the stories of the brown envelopes, we had a much bigger offer in our back pocket at Falmer, is that we always use the supermodels.
Right.
So we had shoots with Carla Bruni, Elle Macpherson, Naomi Campbell, etc., etc. So we always used to go with a package of shots per season.
Yeah.
On the supermodels, so we were guaranteed double page spreads or 2 or 3 double page spreads. And then as that became more successful and we started to do more men's business, we thought at the time, who could we use that would be
was it yourself?
The equivalent? No, it wasn't myself. The equivalent, I wish it was. On men's, who could we use on men's? And the most popular guy, the guy that's taken all the headlines at that time in his very early career, was a footballer called Alan Shearer.
Wow.
So we did a photo shoot
with
Alan Shearer, and I remember having to pick him up from Heathrow one night after the European Cup final. He wasn't playing, he was commentating, and he was with his agent Tony Stevens, and we picked him up from the airport and we drove him down to here. We drove him down into Shoreditch around the corner here, and we did a photo shoot with him, and he was wearing triple denim.
Wow.
In mid-80s, which was very, very cool.
Yeah.
So, funnily enough, and there was a podcast on with Lineker and Shearer and Mika Richards the other day.
And they mentioned you?
No, they showed the pictures of Alan Shearer in triple denim when he had hair and all that kind of stuff. So we used that as an incentive as opposed to... So
and these supermodels, what were they like in real life? I mean, you're obviously not... dinner with
I have a picture in my wallet to this day,
right,
of Carla Bruni,
right,
with her arms draped around me, and
your wife doesn't say anything. I know your wife, Liz.
My wife was there. She was doing the marketing at the time.
She's happy for you to have that picture in your wallet.
Absolutely, because it's next to one of her, and and then she went on to become Mrs. Sarkozy.
Oh, wow.
She became the French president's wife. So I did. I was on that shoot because that shoot was done here in London, and the others were all done in New York.
And then after that, Farmers?
After that with Thelma, in terms of...
What was the next gig?
The next gig was redundancy, and then that's when I got into
What you do now?
no, wasn't it? I went into Timberland. That was why I went to Timberland. After that,
Was that employed or as
employed,
an agent?
Yeah, employed. I was there for a year.
Okay.
Too corporate for me.
Yeah.
One thing that I found as I went through the career was that I'm not a corporate animal.
But if we go back to your childhood, and let's say you were 10 years old, would you have planned what you did? Did you think you were going to do fashion? Did you think you were going to do this? Did you think I'm going to be, I don't know, rally driver? Where were you at?
I was 10 years old.
10, 12, whatever.
I was playing football.
Right.
I was playing football twice a week for Toaster Town. Because I lived in Northampton. So I played for Toaster Town in the Buckingham Boys District League. We were good enough to have a trial match against Chesterfield boys under 15s, I think they were. So we were under 15. So it was a trial match.
So, but you would have liked to be a footballer, perhaps?
I thought I had God's gift. And we went out and we played this team, and they turned out a team of Norman Whitesides. They were 15. They had full beards, tattoos, the whole lot, and they were beasts. And they did a 7 or 8-0. We never got a kick. And at that time, we just realised you're never going to make it. So that was never a real priority for me. I didn't think I'd ever be a footballer, but that's what I spent all my time doing. And my father was a sales manager. He worked for Avon Cosmetics.
Because you say to me that you were applying to Levi's continuously.
Yeah.
Was it because the brand, or was it the company car and the
it was the brand. It was the brand.
Okay.
Just wanted to work for the brand. All those things came as a benefit,
right,
as an extra. But it was always I wanted to go and work for Levi's. Yeah. And as you get through that door, because it was a big name at the bottom of the road.
Yeah.
You go and work for them, and then the doors open up. And as you go through life, and I certainly for family, you do your job, you do it well, you go through a door to the next job, and the door behind you closes, so you can't go back. So you go forward, and then doors and opportunities come over. And as you work for these, I've worked for Levi's, Falmer, I've worked for Timberland, and I work for Red Wing. So you work for some of these really, really big companies. And because of their profile and the profile of your customers, doors open up and you walk through them. Yeah. And then there's no point going back because all the opportunities in front of you. Yeah. And all these other things come as perks. Yeah. Pensions, cars, reasonable living.
So let's try and see if people want to either get into the industry or simply very interested, or they've got family, friends going into it and so on. Perhaps you can give them some words of wisdom, but perhaps reflect on your past experience, what you would have done differently.
I suppose looking back, the only thing that I probably would have done slightly differently was I may have stayed for Levi's a little bit longer.
Right.
But only a couple of years. I think you get to a stage where you've done your natural shelf life or something. And maybe I would have stayed there a little bit longer, but then I wouldn't have experienced inverted commas, the failure of going self-employed too early with no money behind you. So you have to be able to live without an income for 6 to 9 months, and that becomes very difficult if nothing's coming in. So maybe I would have done that a little bit different. The only bit of advice I would give is to have a secure brand behind you if you're going to go self-employed. And perversely, the best way of earning the money to set yourself up is to become redundant. Important.
What about someone getting into the wholesale trade? Because I share a showroom with you. I've seen you talk people out of some products because I can see it's wrong for them, and they pick something up, and you've got a particular way of doing it, which is great. and they feel at ease and they trust you. So it's gaining trust, is showing them that you care, and making sure that you're going to sell something that's going to sell, because otherwise the following season they're not going to buy from you. Have you got any words of wisdom for them on the wholesale side?
On the wholesale side,
don't do it.
Yeah, they'll always remember
Yeah.
the stuff that doesn't sell.
Yeah.
Because you sold it to them.
Yeah, and that's
right?
the reason why you and I both
and the
believe in
stuff
not
that
selling
does
it.
sell, they bought.
Yeah.
So it's it's very much which side of the fence are you on,
Yeah.
and sometimes it's best to sell. It's better to sell less.
Yeah.
And have them come back, and over the seasons they buy more.
Yeah.
And repeats are better than forward orders that don't go through. So have a longer plan than tomorrow.
But going back to how things used to be in the old days, the connection between the buyer and the salesperson, from the old days to now, because I remember going to a particular shop in Ealing and I hadn't made an appointment. This is when mobile phones didn't exist. And he said, go away, you've made an appointment. So I went down the road to the telephone box and I remember ringing the guy up. And he wasn't best pleased because he realized who I was. So you told me to make an appointment. I'm making an appointment now. I want to come back in. I can be there in 5 minutes. So he
Did he say
take great. No, he didn't.
No. He was busy, was he?
At least I tried.
Yeah. Send him flowers.
But nowadays it's everything's done by emails and so on. And you don't get an answer, and then you eventually pick up the phone and you go, hey, blah, 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 I'm so and so. Are you finding it more irritating, more fun, worse? What did you prefer? Do you prefer the old days or do you prefer the new days?
Where you are doing order management, it's easier.
Yeah.
But it's easy to hide behind emails.
Yeah.
So you don't always get everybody. But again, if you have a good relationship with people and you have a good brand and they've been looked after and they feel wanted and loved, which is important, because we do as agents, we want to be wanted and loved. And you have to, if you want to spread the love, they generally, people will pick up the phone, they will answer. And I guess that's important for everybody's business, because sure as hell, if they've got a problem, they want you to pick the phone up, and vice versa. So it has to be a two-way street. And I think that as long as you're responsible and honest, then you'll always have their attention.